This is Hye Rin, a current PhD student at the University of California, Irvine in the School of Education. We are here again with another Motivation Monday interview for the Motivation State community. Today we have here Dr. Kristy Robinson. Dr. Kristy Robinson is an assistant professor in the Department of Educational and Counseling Psychology at McGill University. Her research investigates developmental patterns of specific motivational constructs such as identity, interest, and competence beliefs during adolescence and early adulthood. Moreover, she focuses on theoretically grounded classroom interventions that support students' motivation and identity development. Welcome, Dr. Kristy Robinson.
Thanks so much for having me.
We are glad to have you here too. Our topic for today is more broadly researching during a pandemic. So our first question that we have for you is, how has your research changed in light of the COVID-19 pandemic, and if it has changed at all?
Yeah, I think luckily for me, it hasn't changed a lot. And what has changed has not been devastating. I know that's not the case for everyone, so I feel very lucky in that regard. Some projects that were planned for classrooms this fall had to be shifted to either online or to another time. That's one big difference. And I definitely have shifted my research toward moving existing projects along and adapting data collection strategies for the fall, right, to be appropriate for the online or hybrid contexts. And then for new projects, I've really focused on analyzing existing data, using data that I've already collected. The one project I started was a literature review meta-analysis project, which I had already planned to do, but ended up being a really lucky thing to be working on now because we can do it from the comfort of our homes using very powerful library tools. So that's a good project to be doing during a pandemic when we're doing research under such unusual circumstances.
Thank you. As someone who has contributed invaluable research to the field, we were wondering what are some recommendations for graduate students embarking on research projects to keep in mind. We're interested in knowing particularly about participant sample, data collection strategies, especially in regards to partnerships with schools, data analysis, whether it's secondary or big data sets, but feel free also to share any recommendations outside these areas as well.
Yeah, this is a really great question. I think everybody is under unique pressures now, right? The projects that people had planned already might not be able to conduct in the form that they wanted to, and I just really, I'm alongside them in the same boat, and also sympathizing and empathizing with, in particular, the grad student position where you are not the only person deciding how to adapt your plans. You need to answer to, a supervisor, a committee, as well as to the requirements of your program and the collaborators and colleagues you're working with, right? Just like the rest of us are. So I think a big recommendation that I would make is to rely on existing data when you can. I know we've been saying that as a field for a really long time, but I think we can take that extra seriously now. We have extra incentive to not want to go gather new data right now. There are so many great sources for existing data, right? We have OSF, we have ICPSR, even the Google dataset search is a great place to start. And I'll put in a plug for conducting meta science. This is a need that we've identified in our field for motivation work and for EdPsych more broadly, to really think about how are we conducting our research and how can we improve our approaches to conducting research from sort of a higher level view. I think those are great projects and really valuable projects. So if you do have the luxury of designing a project from scratch right now, meta science could be a great direction to go. And And I think if you can't, if you need to collect your own data, definitely relying on existing partnerships is a good way to go. So whether that's your supervisor or advisor's existing partnerships, you can kind of slide in your own project as part of theirs, or you can call on your network of colleagues, your fellow graduate students, or colleagues of your supervisor. There are lots of great existing partnerships out there. So the trick is to try to see if you can fit your project into those partnerships. Now, of course, not all of us can conduct our research in that way, either using existing data or an existing partnerships. So what do we do if we need to try to form new partnerships now in the middle of a pandemic? I think the advice is, for me at least, the same as if we're not in a pandemic, except that we have to be even more careful and even more mindful of the pressures on educators and on students right now. So I think the main thing that I would consider if I was reaching out right now would be to make sure I'm offering something of real value to schools, to students, to teachers, so that we're not adding additional stresses, but rather trying to alleviate the stresses on these systems. So we have great examples of this in Motivation SIG from people like DeLeon Gray and others who conduct their work from beginning to end in ways that unify their goals with those of the classrooms that they're in. When you think about collecting data, your strategies for collecting data, as well as the kind of data you'll collect, I think it's really important to make sure that it is, at the very least, very low to no impact on these stressed systems, and at best, that's beneficial, right? We can always do better to make sure that the data we collect actually is in service of the goals of the classroom. So to go along with that, all of those recommendations and ideas I just threw out there, they really might require that you learn a new data analysis method or two, which I know can be a little stressful or scary, but it can also be a great opportunity. I always encourage students, colleagues, friends to improve your methods tool belt. So many methods training opportunities are online now. There are increasingly, just for the pandemic, some are freely available when they weren't before. People are home alone, like looking for things to learn about, and I think methods are a great thing to do. And there are also people right here in MoSig, as well as in our broader networks, who are willing to help with these issues, especially for students, right? Because students need to get their work done, and that's a plight we all understand. So methods training will always open doors. So it's always worth getting more methods training. And it's worth learning a new method so that you can appropriately handle the data that you might need to collect that's different from what you planned before, right? And so in the last sort of category of answers for this question, for data management and analysis, your future self will definitely thank you if you record everything you do in great detail, from collection to processing to analysis, and use reasonable file naming and storage protocols. I have been on the back end of not remembering what I did or how I did it, and I always feel really grateful when I find my old notes and can reconstruct them. So it's definitely worth the time to do that along the way rather than reconstructing afterward. Getting colleagues to check your work, especially with processing and analysis, to make sure that your data is right and that your analysis is right, always a great practice. And then my last sort of semi-hypocritical recommendation is to learn R. One of the impacts of the pandemic for me and the people I'm working with currently is that we have lost some of our access to software, right? Because we had it loaded onto desktops that were in the physical lab space. So it's been tougher for us to access SPSS and M+ that we need. I think it would be similar if we were using NVivo or other softwares. So we either have to purchase those for our own machines or use remote desktop, which, as we all know, is not amazing. So any experience that you can gain with R, I always say the best time to learn R was last year, but the second best time is right now. So definitely encourage people to learn R.
Thank you. These are some wonderful resources that you've mentioned. On a similar note, are there any other resources that you found particularly helpful for researching in a pandemic?
Yeah, I mean, there are some that I think won't be surprising and won't be unique to me. Definitely video meeting software like we're using now here, Zoom, or Teams, or even WebEx or FaceTime, whatever works for people. I myself have used synchronous collaboration tools a lot during the pandemic and before, such as Google Docs and Google Sheets, so that I can collaborate in real time, and I can see what my collaborators are doing at the same time. We can write together, we can code data together, we can do a lot. We've used Ryan for our article screening. There are some really great tools for a lot of the different research tasks that we use, but I have particularly valued those that allow us to collaborate in real time. And oddly enough, Twitter is another one that I have found to be really useful for sort of finding people and bodies of research that I might not be able to know about otherwise. There's a lot of great expertise on social media that we can access just by asking a question. And it serves the dual purpose of also giving us a social outlet and having social connection that we're missing a lot during these days.
Yes, I definitely agree that social connection is an important part of where we are today.
Yeah.
Um, I, we were also wondering what you have learned or changed that will remain a part of your research pandemic practice after the pandemic.
Yeah, I love this question. I love this question because it helps us reflect on what good things might we gain from the pandemic when we tend to focus a lot on what we've lost. Um, I thought a lot about this question, and I think for me, doing research during the pandemic has really driven home some important lessons that I tend to forget, but that really apply more broadly to research and how we do it. So the first thing that I think about is, we need to think carefully about the need for travel and the purposes of travel that we do, whether that's daily commuting to the office or to research sites, or for conference travel for disseminating our research. Lots of research can be done effectively online. I think we have seen that before and we're seeing it more now. People are being increasingly creative about this and it's very exciting. And that can really also help lower the burden on people's time, whether it's your research participants or the researchers or your colleagues. And also on the planet. I think it's really important that we do what we can to lower the burden of our research on the planet. But also, balancing that with the need to, sometimes we need to bump into each other in the hallways or share a meal or a hug. And those are important purposes for travel too. So, I don't want to discount that at all. Another thing that has really, the pandemic has made me reflect on is about data privacy and data storage, which I know is kind of a weird turn for the conversation, but our university, my university, has provided a lot of guidance about this because all of our researchers have been trying to move everything online. And so we have to write in detail about the ways that we will ensure data is protected and stored carefully, and that participants know everything that will happen to their data. And that's driven home the importance of this, right? It's important to be really transparent with participants about how their data is collected, how it's stored, how it's used, and even link them to the privacy policies of the tools that I use and tell them what specific tools will be used, just like you guys do a great job of in this series. And then lastly on this topic, the collaborations with people have become really increasingly important. They've always been important, but I've found that it's really important for me to have collaborations with people who I like and who energize me. This makes a huge difference in my day-to-day quality of life and in the energy with which I approach the research. So To the extent that I have been able to plan into my day, interactions with the people that do this for me, has been really great, really great.
Next, we are also interested in how you have navigated working from home during this pandemic. So we have a series of sub questions here. So the first one is, what self-regulatory strategies have you employed during this pandemic?
Yeah, I'll start by saying I've always really liked working from home. I'm pretty well suited to it. I'm pretty introverted, and I really like time to think deeply and to get really involved in my writing, my reading. I I didn't ever plan to be working from home for an extended period with all of my family members also at home though, so that's a new challenge. So the main self-regulatory strategies I think that have helped, they're strategies I've often used before, but they seem to be especially important now, are simply to list and prioritize tasks each day, um, with this framing question of what absolutely must get done in order for me to feel calm and accomplished at the end of the day. And usually, especially at the beginning of the pandemic when everything was in upheaval and all the kids were out of school and nobody knew what was going to happen, usually it was one or two things each day that needed to get checked off. Even now, I usually do between 1 and 3 things per day, and they have to be pretty small. But if I get those checked off, then I can kind of breathe easy at the end of the day. That really helps me. And of course, if I showed you my to-do list, it's just like all of ours, it's ridiculously long. But I try to identify smaller tasks each day that can keep me moving on my most important goals. And of course, breaking tasks down into manageable chunks and crossing things off as I go has also been especially important and useful to me, because it gives me that little, burst of joy that I actually am making progress.
And the next question that we have is, how have you addressed challenges with drawing a line between the research and home life?
Yeah, well, I'll start by saying that I can't say that I have done this very effectively. It's really hard, and I think, for any of us who are craving advice on this or reflecting and trying to do better on this, I think we also have to acknowledge that sometimes we just can't, right? Like, it is a very unusual time. It hopefully won't last forever, and so we just have to make it through. But in the best of times, it's hard to maintain balance and lines between our research lives and our home lives, because a lot of us do research because we love it so much and we love thinking about these complex issues and problem solving and all those things. So when my home and my work are just steps away from each other, it's even more difficult. So I do have a couple of strategies, but I definitely, want to acknowledge that I am not the best at this. So for me, I just make sure to have one part of the house where I always do my work. I'll sometimes, move to a different part of the house, but I have a desk that I literally bought during the pandemic so that I could work more effectively from home. And this is reserved for my work, and I don't really do anything else here. That does help, because when I step away from the desk, usually that means I'm also stepping away from work. And related to that, I do maintain work hours as much as possible, as well as times when I don't work. So just like if I was going into the office and staying from 9 to 5, I try to begin my day after a morning ritual and breakfast and coffee and get ready for the day and begin my day like normal as much as possible. And then same at the end of the day, tie up the tasks so they're ready for tomorrow, and then step away and try to stay away, with varying levels of success.
You talk a lot about working from home, and we were wondering, how has working from home changed the way you approach your work, if at all?
Yeah, that is also a really great question. And I would say it hasn't changed it a lot for me, having, worked from home quite a bit before and being a fairly, self-directed, introverted type of worker. The one thing I have taken away, and I hope I'll take away in the end, is the importance of taking regular breaks throughout the day, for exercise, for water, for sunshine, for caffeine, and even for family duties, right? So when all the family is here up in the same space, there needs to be time to reconnect and make sure that, while I'm getting my important work done, that they also know they're valued, and that, I'm still in relationship with them. So those breaks really, even more than before, they keep my ideas flowing, they keep me energized, they prevent burnout. And I think before this, I wouldn't always do that, because I'd go to my office and I would stay attached to my work all day, and then at the end of the day, I'd wonder, why am I so tired? I was just, sitting there working on research all day. But now I'm, starting to implement some of this, good science that we have about the need for breaks, and that's been really great.
Thank you. You also talk about in the beginning or and towards the middle of our interview that you stay connected with your colleagues and the importance of staying with being connected. How do you stay connected with colleagues to work collaboratively, especially during this pandemic?
Yeah, this is a really important issue, and a really tricky one now. We have so many great technologies for this, but I think a big takeaway from the pandemic, thus far for me, is just that the collaboration is going to require more time and more thoughtful strategies, right? No matter how great our technologies are, we still have to put in a little extra effort to connect with our colleagues and to work effectively with them, because we can't just go knock on somebody's door or turn to our neighbor and say, oh, like, how do I do this thing I don't know how to do. It's a little harder to get support, it's a little harder to give support, it takes more time. So I've been trying to build that more into my day. uh, the main tools I've been using, I think, are probably the tools that most people have been using, just email and video conferencing. Twitter, like I mentioned, has been really useful. But then for some colleagues, you just have to connect with them on the media or the app that they're most comfortable with. So I have also used text messaging or different collaborative tools, instant messaging, like whatever it takes to get connected. Sometimes we have to use. And I think that goes for both, like working meetings where we're hammering out tasks or working together, or for those, more social in between checks to see how we're doing. And I think the main thing that came to mind on this topic when I was looking at the questions was something that's meant the most to me, doing research collaboratively during the pandemic, is the time that we take to check on each other's well-being first, and to provide support and whatever boosts of joy we can for each other, in doing the work together, because we're in this together. And it's important that we support each other in whatever way we can, because all the pressures that are on us in normal times are just, so much more emphasized and so much more intense now. So I hope we all have, built into our workflow opportunities to connect and to be humans together too.
Those are all the questions that I have for you. Thank you for joining us here today, and I really appreciate your time and your thoughts on researching during a pandemic, especially during this difficult time. So I hope you stay safe.
Thank you so much. It's been so fun to talk about these things, and I really appreciate you guys thinking of me.